Hey guys, so today's podcast I talk about labels, one of which is the one you see in the title, not being black enough. That can go for, any race or ethnicity, or labels come with any group you're a part of in life. So I talk about that, how that's influenced me, labels that I've put on myself, not even labels other people have given on to me, but things I've just accepted and I've defined myself as. And how that's impacted me, how I'm sort of dealing with that, and I'm sort of trying to overcome in life. And it's a struggle, but I thought this would be a relatable podcast, and I really wanted to talk about it. It was something on my heart. So I hope you all enjoy, can learn something new, and thanks for tuning in. All right, hey guys, podcast time again. So today I really wanted to talk about labels. I wrote down some notes for this podcast, but I really want it to be very just freestyle, I don't know, just talking off the top of my head sort of thing. And I want to talk about labels, how they've impacted my life, what labels people have given me, how that's influenced me or hasn't influenced me, and just I feel like labels is something that we learn to give. We're not born with labels. I was recently, just like an hour ago, I was watching a TED Talk. I was sort of preparing for what I wanted to say, what I wanted to cover, and the girl... it was two girls in this TED Talk, and they said, labels are for identifying, but they don't identify me. And that's what I want to discuss. I love that. I love that line. I love that quote. And I think that really just encompasses what I want to talk about today. We're just sort of diving straight into it. I hope you guys are having a good day. I just sort of just went into the deep end, first things first. But we're going to try this podcast style. Before I kind of had a plan of what I was going to talk about. And I do have an idea, I did wrote down some main points just so I know, how to start. But other than that, I'm just going to free talk today. So the first thing, which I'm probably going to make the title of the podcast, and the main thing I think that came to mind when I wanted to make this podcast was not being quote-unquote black enough. And this can go for any ethnicity, any group you belong to, where you're not, people in your certain group or dynamic or race or ethnicity or whatever, you're a part of, view you as less of something because of XYZ, whatever factors. And this, once again, this can go for everything, and this does not mean everyone in this group is like that, but when people tell you that, it almost takes you aback. But I'm going to talk about not being, quote, black enough, and then how that's affected me, why I've sort of thought these things about myself, and why people think these sort of things about me. And even though some of these things I might mention may not be completely true, just talking about how I feel and how I view my life, how I view these circumstances. So I think one of the main reasons why I think I've started to believe, or people have started to tell me why I'm not black enough, more so me in particular, my parents, both my parents, my mom and my dad, and the majority of my cousins, not all of them, but a large some of them, live in predominantly black communities. And me, on the other hand, I live on a predominantly white community. And it's different because I feel like we grew up with different people, with different cultures. Not different cultures, I'm still obviously, I'm proud to be black and I'm proud to be who I am. But I wanted to just hone in on this label and why I feel like I'm different almost. But yeah, so my parents, my cousins, they live in predominantly black areas where they always grew up with people that looked like them, and kind of had similar cultures. They understood similar jokes, and they were kind of in the same boat, if that makes sense. They were all kind of used to their way of life. Me, I live in a predominantly white community. I think it's something that my parents and my cousins can't necessarily like relate to. Not necessarily because it's a good or bad thing that you live in a mainly white community or mainly black community. You know, where you raised is where you were raised, and it influences your character, whether you like it or not, whether it's for good or bad, positive or negative. Where you grow up has an impact on you. And I think having that being my circumstance made me almost feel a little bit disconnected, I guess, from the culture. I think a lot of the times I feel like even sometimes when family members will be at like, you know, dinners for holidays or whatever, and someone will make a joke and I'll try to contribute to the joke or laugh, and I feel like people, not all people, but I feel like some people, even family members, almost kind of look at me like I can't relate to the joke because I live in a mainly white community, or as I don't have the right to make the joke because I, you know, don't really know what they're talking about. And I say that because it's things like, I guess, like TV shows that are like historically like black, like for example Good Times, one of the first few mainstream television series to have, you know, a black family. Like I'll make a joke from it and people will be like, how do you know about that? That's not your time. Like I almost don't belong saying that, or I almost don't belong associating myself with that. And not just TV shows, well, yeah, Good Times, but then also other TV shows like, what is it? Stanford? I think it's Stanford. I don't know, but one of those two. Even though I never like watched it consistently, but growing up, like my parents watched it and I saw like a couple episodes and here and there on TV. Same thing with Good Times. And with Fresh Prince, I didn't watch, you know, a lot of Fresh Prince, but I saw it on TV as, you know, other people in my family were watching it. So whenever I feel like now I make a joke about those types of things, it's almost like I feel like people are judging me because I don't belong saying that. Like it sounds weird coming out of my mouth. And it's weird to think that these sort of things that society puts on you or puts on me kind of influence the way that you think of yourself and see yourself. And I gave examples talking specifically about like music and TV shows and jokes. Well, shows and jokes, but music's another thing. Like if I say that I like a hip hop artist or something like that, I didn't used to always like hip hop. It's kind of like, honestly, it's sort of like a recent thing. I like good artists, not just any artists, but it's almost like if you like a hip hop song, or if you like something that's not, I guess, quote, white culture, it almost like people kind of look at me. I feel like people don't speculate that to come from me, and it kind of makes me feel almost disconnected from the culture. And it's not ideal, and it's once again, it's not everyone that is black or everyone that is a part of this race, but it's something that I've experienced in just being a part of the black community. Maybe some of you guys can relate to it and have similar experiences of that happening. And I'm trying to think of some other examples of what ways people believe that about me. I think also another label many people have given me is, because I'm from the outside, I feel like I'm very, like, innocent, cute, quiet, kind of sort of coming into my own sort of stage. Like, I don't look my age. I look younger than I am. I'm very innocent, sweet, wouldn't hurt a fly, I feel like people see me as. And I feel like people definitely characterize that under people, and I feel like this definitely happens to a lot of people. You'll see in like movies or TV shows, or you hear about it, where like someone that you never expect would do something, does something that's, I guess, quote unquote, like evil or like bad, rebellious, and you wouldn't expect that from this person. And I honestly feel like those types of things come from people when you place people in boxes. When you categorize them by how they look without actually giving them a chance to be themselves and to set it free and to just be a person, not a label. And it's interesting because a lot of the times when I mentioned this in one of my previous episodes of the podcast. I think it was the first one, I'm not too sure. I talked about how people, when they see me, they see an innocent girl that doesn't do anything, wouldn't hurt a fly kind of personality. And people also, I feel like in school, see me as someone who's like a high achiever, makes good grades, never does anything bad, doesn't disrespect her parents, all that fun stuff. And it almost makes you feel bad about yourself if you don't live up to those expectations that people set on you. Not that it's right, but it's just the way I feel like society works and the way culture wants to teach us. And it's interesting because whenever you don't live up to those expectations, people look at you as if you were a different person. However, you were always the same person. It was just people want to identify you as a label and not you as a person. Another label people have given me at school, and I want to talk about, is people who, I've always just been like a sort of quiet person. I've never really talked to people in school before this year. This year, I'm not great. Not the best at socializing, but I've been getting a lot better with sort of initiating conversations in uncomfortable situations, because I feel like just initiating the conversation in like dead silent rooms or just initiating the action, people are going to want to follow after. I was actually, this is kind of off topic, but I was listening to a TED Talk by this, she's a blogger, she's a writer, she's influencer, she's a speaker, motivational speaker, however you want to say it, and she did a TED Talk called Get Comfortable with Being Uncomfortable. Her name is Lovey, I can't say her last name, but in the TED Talk she said, and I'll always remember this, to be the domino, because she's talking about how to influence change, and she said, to influence change, you need to be the domino. And if you know a line of dominoes, one has to fall before the others can fall after it. So one domino has to fall, which leads the others choiceless to follow after. So she said that in the TED Talk. And another thing that she said was, a lot of the times being the domino comes down to being exactly who you are. And I really like that, because it makes you think that like change is something that is so, or just being different in a situation is something that I feel like seems so foreign to us, when it actually should be really natural. We're just not used to being our natural selves because we're used to being shaped and molded and sculpted by the stereotypes and the realities of society. And it's kind of it's sad when you think about it that way, but it also gives you a lot of hope that you can be a change and you can be a domino. You can be a light, because a lot of the times being that change you want to see in the world comes down to being exactly who you are. And that's something that's really hard to think about and to, I guess, wrap your mind around, because I feel like a lot of the times we think about change, we think about these revolutionary people, even sometimes, well, for me personally, I've always had issues with just fully accepting myself and wanting just to be my entire self and be happy with every part of who I am. And one of the things I feel like I'm self-conscious about is saying these sort of woke, I hate saying that word. Like, I feel like when I say it seriously, like, it just, like, degrades the meaning of what I'm trying to say. But I feel like advocating for, justice and speaking out on things that aren't right, speaking my mind, talking about my faith, talking about, God, talking about, Jesus, my faith, what else? My beliefs, my thoughts, my political standpoints, saying things that bother me, like speaking about these things that circulate my mind, I feel like people judge me for. And this may not even be true at all. It probably isn't true. But a lot of the times, those things I'm thinking, which are constantly circulating my mind, like they're at the core of who I am, a lot of the times I think these changes that I want to see, and these changes, these things that I'm trying to suppress, are the changes that I feel like need to be made in the world. And it kind of just reminded me how a lot of, like, this TED Talk, and how being the change, being the domino, comes down to being exactly who you are. And it's weird to think about, because I feel like I'm just at a totally different place than most 16-year-olds at this stage. Which is why my, like, tagline, I guess, for this podcast is societal issues and silly conversations, all from the perspective of your not-so-average teenage female. That's a mouthful to say, but I don't know, I've always felt like I've just been different and out of the box, and I don't know, like, I speak about these things because they're dear to my heart. Like, I'm passionate about these types of conversations, and I love having these deep conversations, and that's why I wanted to start a podcast, is because I thought it would be somewhere where I could express these opinions, and I would be comfortable. It's a way that I could get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because when I really started being passionate about like social justice, and I started, like, I guess, advocacy and trying to be aware on the world and world events, I initially started on Twitter, because a lot of the times I would get news from Twitter, and I mean, Twitter's a good place just to tweet your thoughts, to say your thoughts to an audience. And my Twitter was for my gaming YouTube channel at the time. I mean, I still have it, and I still use it, but I would always bombard my Twitter, which is for gaming YouTube, with, like, I guess, my thoughts on society and politics in the world. And I always felt like I was being annoying, or a disturbance to my followers, because I had these opinions. And I thought maybe I should be talking more about, I guess, video games, because this is a gaming Twitter ultimately. Or maybe I should talk about, I don't know, like, I should do more comedy stuff, more funny stuff, more silly stuff. And I always tried to tell myself what I feel like I should have been doing. When, like, to be yourself, you don't have to think. Like, ultimately, being your genuine self, you shouldn't have to reevaluate. And that's just, the things that I said were just the things that I felt like I needed to put out. Like, a lot of the times, like, I love seeing, silly stuff. I love, laughing and having fun. But I almost, even with this podcast, like, I feel like I have to justify the fact that I'm not just, like, this advocate that cares about, like, the world issues and stuff like that. I feel like I also have to justify that I'm also just a normal human being. I love to laugh just like everyone else, and I love to have fun, and I want that podcast to also encompass this as well. And I mean, that's also another big reason why I decided on the name PassionFruit, is because it's playful, and I thought it would be interesting to see people's feedback, and how they respond to that, and how they respond to, I guess, the content I put on here. But that leads me to kind of another thing I thought I'd talk about, and I guess that's labels around YouTube. Because I started YouTube a very long time ago. I actually recently looked back at this. For the longest time, I thought I started YouTube going into 6th grade. Apparently, I started YouTube going into 7th grade because I started my YouTube channel in July. I started in May. My first video was in July, so technically May, July of 2013. I entered middle school in 2012, which means the summer of 2013 would have been 6th grade just ending. So I started my YouTube gaming channel going into the 7th grade. And I had made a couple YouTube videos before on a separate channel, which I've actually deleted now. If you watched my podcast about growing up in the 21st century, I explained my obsession with Bakery Story. My first YouTube videos were actually on a separate account, and they were about Bakery Story. They were Bakery Story designs, and I uploaded them and made it in Windows Movie Maker. It was such a bad video, but that's why I started making videos that way. I started making YouTube videos that way, I should specify. I was making videos for a little bit longer, or a little bit prior to that. Anyways, so I said all that to say, I started YouTube back in 2013, and some stigmas, I guess, or some labels that come up with YouTube. A lot of the time on the internet, people will just identify you with or label you by what they know you as. And it's not, I guess, necessarily their fault. It's just like a people problem. People always want to have a way to identify you. And as I said earlier, labels are a way of identifying. I am not identified. Labels do not identify me. They are a way to identify, but they do not identify me. And when I first started, back in the day, I made Club Penguin videos, which, yes, people who don't know me are probably very confused. And I think it's interesting seeing people's reactions. But it's I was 12 at the time, or 11, or however old I was, and I don't think I was a part of a community where that's where people knew me as, and I loved that community, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed being a part of that community, and I learned so much, and met so many awesome people, and made so many amazing friends. But when I started to, I guess, branch off and do other things, you had those people, the people that only came for you for that one thing. I guess that the way they saw you eventually drifted off. Obviously, people, got older, more mature, and those people also left also. But when I started making Sims videos, which was 8th grade, I'm fast forwarding time. I might want to do a podcast talking about my YouTube story. Not that no one no one cares. I only okay, this is gonna sound really egotistical, but I recently stopped making YouTube videos, but I have 1.4K subscribers, so I thought it would be interesting sort of telling my story and telling just my journey and just what I've learned from being just an average person who made YouTube videos, not like a YouTuber that's famous and stuff. But anyways, what I was talking about. What was I talking about? I was talking about when I started making Sims videos, and obviously people grew out of the game Club Penguin, and they left the channel. But then also people who only saw me as Club Penguin YouTuber. I felt like I couldn't, for a while, I felt like I couldn't upload my Sims videos also on that same channel because one, I feel like it wouldn't suit the brand. I feel like people, I didn't want to have to take off a label and make a new one, if that makes sense. It was almost kind of creating two separate channels for these two games. It's almost this label belongs on this label or this channel, and this label belongs on this channel. Like, this is a Club Penguin / Minecraft channel, and this is a Sims channel. And I started playing Minecraft recently on that channel before I stopped. Anyways, but I felt like, and this, even before I transitioned into Sims, back when I was still in the Club Penguin stage, when I started uploading Minecraft also, I felt like I even made a video asking if I should make a separate video for Minecraft, because it's almost like, this is Minecraft, this is Club Penguin, you subscribe to what you subscribe to and you get nothing else. And I feel like we apply those same mentalities when we talk about people and when we talk about society. And we apply those those very black and white psychologies and ideologies when it comes to how we treat people. Like, you subscribe to what you subscribe to, and that's it. You get nothing else. And it's weird that we have to think like that, because I didn't want to make just all be one thing and this channel all be another thing. Like, I just wanted to be me. But I knew and it's so hard to think about, but when you're trying to create a brand and create your own successful channel, and not that I'm famous, I'm not trying to say that I'm famous or not trying to sound narcissistic, egotistical, etc. But when you're trying to create your own, I guess, brand and name for yourself, you almost have to take that risk of either you do a bunch of different things on one channel and some videos are going to do really well, other videos, aren't, or you don't know how people are going to respond, people are going to say this doesn't belong here. But if you stick with the very black and white thing, we end up just applying those same way of thinking into real life, which is so bad. And we end up placing people in those types of boxes, and I don't like that. Lecrae, I talked about him in another episode. He made an album, I believe, called Anomaly, and it's about, he said this in an interview. I was watching an interview and he talked about it. I actually had to listen to the album because, fake fan. No, but he was talking about his album named Anomaly, and anomaly basically means someone who doesn't, or something that doesn't exactly fit somewhere. It's kind of like the odd one out. It's the oddball. And he talked about that album and how people can't exactly categorize him as an artist because he's a hip-hop artist, he's a rapper, but a lot of times, since he talks about his faith a lot, people categorize him as like gospel. He's a gospel rapper. He's a Christian rapper, and that's it. They don't just see him as a rapper or just Lecrae. They see him as Christian rapper. And what he said was very interesting is he didn't say this, but what I'm paraphrasing what he says is he doesn't really want to be seen as a Christian rapper. He just wants to be seen as himself. He wants to be seen as a Lecrae. He wants to be seen as a rapper who so happens to be Christian. And he said in his interview that naturally, as an artist, whoever you are is going to come out in your art, no matter what you do. If you're at the core of you is, God or your faith, that's naturally going to come out in what you do and what you say and what you sing about and what you rap about and what you create. And, people seem to just take that category and to be like, well, you're always talking about God, so you must be this. And like, no, that's at the core of who you are. So it's like, yeah, I talk about this because that's who I am. Why can't I just be seen as me and not just these labels? And I feel like that with that's kind of what I was saying about Twitter and about, when I was thinking, should I even be tweeting these types of things or talking about God, and it's definitely different. It's difficult because I've only recently, like within the past year, started talking about my faith on the channel, and I have gotten some positive feedback. I never got a whole ton of comments, but from the comments I did get, people were more so supportive of me talking about my faith and stuff like that, rather than negative comments. And a lot of the times, and it's scary to talk about controversial things that people don't always agree with, but it's a real thing. It's a real issue. And it's scary to do it, but it was necessary. And I really feel like I needed to say that, and I need to use my platform and use my voice, because, you know, with all the things like that have happened over the past couple of years, like myself now in 2018 and myself 1 year ago from today, 2017, completely different people. Maybe even not, maybe more like 2016 me versus 2018 me, two completely different people. Like me as a junior in high school, me as a sophomore in high school, drastically different. Like my life has changed so much, and I've just had so many just emotions and roller coasters and life events happened that has shaped me into who I am. And one of the main reasons I talk about my faith is because like last year, like I did not know who God was, and I ran away from him, and I saw how that drastically transformed me as a person. Like I wasn't even recognizable last year, and becoming the person that I am again. That's why I'm so open about what I believe, is because like that's at the core of who I am, because that changed me, and I want to share that joy and share that love and share that peace with other people. And even me on my journey now, I'm still in a really weird spiritual space, because going back to the whole thing where people kind of see me as just someone who's sort of innocent, cute, sweet, won't hurt a fly, doesn't do anything wrong, you know, goes to church every Sunday type of like personality. That's how I feel like people see me. I feel like I can't mess up or like do anything bad or do anything, I guess, not ideal. I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but I feel like with the whole spirituality thing, people tend to see, I mean, this is people who don't know, tend to see people who are Christian or just believe in God as people who all they do is preaching because they think they're perfect, etc. But it's like, it's the complete opposite. Obviously, those are ignorant people that just don't, know about the faith, and you need more people speaking out about it. But like the reason I talk about, God so much and I talk about my faith is because I'm so not perfect, and being a Christian does not make me perfect. It makes me like need God even more. Being a Christian does not make my life any easier. It makes it harder. Like Cray said that in one of his interviews. I think he was on the Breakfast Club. I've been really enjoying listening to The Breakfast Club recently. It's a radio station, but they also have a YouTube channel, and I've been listening to their re-uploads of interviews on YouTube. So I also like watching like old ones and stuff. But he was saying, Lecrae was saying, being a Christian actually makes my life harder. It does not make it easier. And it's interesting. It's definitely interesting. But I sort of talked about I started talking about just labels, not being black enough. I guess my labels, so with YouTube, with faith, and there's some other things I wrote down in my notes, but I think I'm going to take a quick break and get some water, reevaluate my thoughts, and finish up this podcast episode. If you made it this far in the podcast, please consider giving me a rating on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you're watching. If you're on SoundCloud, leave me a comment. Same with YouTube. Wherever you're watching, let me know what you think. or you can send me an email at thepassionfruitpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know your opinions on any of the things I've mentioned in this episode so far, or you can do it at the end. I also say a reminder at the end. And also follow us on Twitter. I keep forgetting, it's not us, it's me. But I have a Twitter. It's PassionFruitPod. The O in pod is a 0. So you can check me out on there too. Just gotta get that weekly self-promo in. All right. So I got some water, and I'm sort of just looking over my notes, and I actually think I will be able to touch base on everything today. Actually, I'm not going to speak too soon, because that may not happen. We'll see. But I wanted to sort of continue talking about YouTube, and I guess there's a couple more points I wrote down that I didn't mention about being I put internet personality. Once again, no way trying to sound like important or anything, but being someone who's on the internet, and in my case particularly, I made gaming videos. I feel like another thing that a lot of people, or that I faced, I can't speak for all people, but was feeling like I could only be one side of who I was on the internet. And this might have been sort of implied from what I was saying before, but I thought I'd just sort of pinpoint that particularly. And this also, I see this in a lot of female gamers, where they like to play video games, and they have their gaming channel, and then a lot of times they'll have a second, like, lifestyle channel, or, where they can do vlogs, or beauty, makeup, fashion, things like that. And also another thing that sort of bothered me is or just recently has bothered me, because I feel like you can't be your complete self in one channel. You had to be two separate people. And I give these examples and I give these analogies is because there's stuff in my life that I can relate to, and it's stuff that I think a lot of other young people my age, can relate to. I don't have a lot of life experience, so I give you the life experience that I do have, and I use those examples, and I use those analogies, and I run with them. But that's another big one I thought of. And a YouTuber that I really love and I really look up to, Ice Cupquake. I've been watching her since I've been like 13, and she's one of the few people I still watch from then. And she recently decided to combine both of her gaming channel and her lifestyle channel. So she decided to start posting her lifestyle channel videos on her gaming channel. And I don't think she has done a whole ton of it yet. I haven't actually seen a fashion video or makeup video on it yet. She probably just hasn't, worked on anything or put out anything yet. But she made an update video at the beginning of the year saying that she wanted to combine it because she wanted to feel like one whole person. She didn't want to feel like two separate people. And I feel like I really understand that now, and sort of can comprehend what she was explaining then. And that sort of relates to, or that definitely relates to what I've been talking about in this podcast. So I thought I would mention that. And so yeah, just being able to having separate channels, feeling like you can only be a gamer on this channel, and you can only be girly on this channel, feminine, whatever. So yeah, that's another thing. I just wanted to make sure I identified that point clearly. And another thing I thought I wanted to talk about is in school again. I mentioned people in school, and just I think the mass majority of people think I am, see me as a quiet, shy girl, and I mentioned that earlier. But another thing a lot of my peers think at school is this is a recent thing, but I'm on my school's video, announcements team. We make, weekly video announcements, so I edit for them, and, my name, and, we have, a list of editors, so people know that I do this, and a lot of times people identified me with just the girl that, makes videos, and is in charge of these announcements, and is a part of that, and people use that label to identify me. And not that I don't like making videos, I actually recently stopped making YouTube videos. I still make videos. I am in a film class. I take TV production and digital movie making. And I'm actually about to graduate that class, which is weird to think about. I go to like a specialty trade school sort of thing every other day, and I go to public school the other days. So people identify me. That's all saying that to say that people tend to identify with me as someone who just makes videos, and that's it. That's all they really know about me. And I guess you can sort of relate that to YouTube, because obviously I started doing that because I had experience with making YouTube videos, etc. But people also, like, recently on YouTube have seen me as just someone who's really good at editing videos. And same goes to people at school, as I just mentioned. And not that I take offense to that, but I think what bothered me mainly about that is that because people use that to identify me. And it's not that I didn't like that characteristic, is that I just don't like people using these labels like to identify who I am. And that kind of goes to say all these labels that I've discussed, like, once again, being quiet. It's not that I honestly don't think I'm really that quiet. I just am not always loud. Like, I'm not always the first one to speak and to jump up. Like, I have other ways I make my voice heard. And this podcast is one way I want to make my voice heard. And I'm working on it, but it's not that title offends me. It's just that people see me as that is what makes me upset. Like, I don't want to be identified by a label. Same thing with faith. I don't want to be seen as a Christian. Like, I want to be seen as Mackenzie, who just so happens to be Christian, and just, to love God. And let's see, what else? Same thing with YouTube. It's not that I don't like being, like, I'm a gaming YouTuber. It's that I just want to be a person that happens to make videos, who happens to like gaming, who happens to also like, fashion and beauty and makeup and hair. Like, I want to just be me. I don't want to be placed in a box. And so I'm kind of, I don't know, you're not so average teenage female. I'm kind of a lot of things. Also, same thing with the black thing. Not that I'm not black enough. I don't think I've given enough credit that I love being black. I'm very proud to be who I am, and I love, my race. I love the melanin, but I started this video, and I most likely titled this podcast that, is because that thought came to mind when I started thinking about talking about labels on the podcast, is that phrase. And no one has, I guess, called me not black enough, but I can tell people consider me like an Oreo, black on the outside and white on the inside. And I personally never have gotten the whole "why do you speak so white" thing. I know that's a thing some black people say. Once again, not all black people. I'm not trying to... I think I also have to be careful with these podcasts, is because sometimes when you're from an outside perspective, if you're maybe not black and you just hear me bashing black people, you get a perspective that that's all they are. And I don't want to give that interpretation to you, because that's not true. These are just a few people that have said or have done these things, have said these things, or that I've perceived from them, doing these things. And these are things I've perceived from them. Not that all black people are like that, or not that my whole family is like that. Obviously, family, we make mistakes, we get back up, we forgive each other, etc. But I just want to make that clear, that it's not that all black people do this, but it's just some incidents and how I've processed this and how it's impacted my life. So I'm talking from this perspective also. I do want to make some podcasts also kind of about, like, being proud of where you came from, being black in America, or or just being black. I really want to do a podcast with my friend, kind of the experience being black in a predominantly white area. I think that'd be interesting. I think because we've did very different experiences, so I think it'd be interesting. Anyways, back to what I was saying, not being black enough. I love being black. I just don't like being characterized as like, oh, she's black, or she's an Oreo, etc. And oh, I was saying this earlier. I personally have never gotten the "why you speak so proper" comment by some black people. Because some people think if you don't use slang or that you can speak properly, that it's like, why are you talking so white? I'm like, okay, because I have grammar and speak properly. I don't love my race. Like, it's just ridiculous. Obviously, those are just ignorant people, but I've definitely heard people have gotten that response and that comment. I have never personally, I've been fortunate enough to have never received that comment, but I've definitely heard of people saying that to them. And I honestly am not gonna lie, the whole not being black enough kind of not concerns me, but I guess concerns. It's one of the things that is almost making me question going to an HBCU. And it's not that, okay, I kind of have to like rephrase. It's not that HBCUs are out of my range, historically black colleges and universities, for those who don't know. Because I'm about to end my junior year. Actually, by the time you see this, I probably have already ended my junior year. So I'm about to be a senior in high school, and I'm thinking about colleges, where I want to go, what I want to study, my major, etc. And one of the huge things is that both of my parents went to HBCUs. My dad actually went to like 4 colleges or something crazy like that. But both of them at some point went to HBCUs, and they loved their experience there. And honestly, I feel like I'm maybe call me pessimist, but like I don't want the negative. I don't want to have to deal with any of the negative comments. I don't know if that's the right word. Like, I don't want to have to come across people who have the sort of narrow-mindedness of what black people should be. And once again, this is also to say that this is not all black people, and I understand this is not all black people, but it's one of those like sort of like deep, like itty bitty tiny concerns you have, like in your mind, like this is probably not going to be an issue, and obviously there's going to be narrow-minded people like there is everywhere you go, but like deep down inside you kind of have that concern, like, will people just accept me for who I am, even if I'm not necessarily, I guess, what some may consider to be, quote, black. And it's just like a tiny concern of mine this is not going to make or break my decision to go to an HBCU. And I was also considering doing a podcast on that. I just have so many ideas. I'm really excited to do this, to make this podcast and talk about all different types of things. But it's definitely something that has crossed my mind, and it's something that I think a lot of people can relate to. Also, being another thing I thought I would mention is the disconnection. Maybe this relates to not being black enough. Maybe it's not being African enough. But I think the disconnection, I feel like, with African Americans in the African continent. I know that's sort of like a relevant topic. Because I was thinking about Black Panther, which came out, phenomenal movie, came out a while ago. I remember seeing it on the release weekend. And Killmonger, Michael B. Jordan's character, who's like the villain / relatable villain character, one of his big conflicts, his, I guess, character versus character, character versus himself conflicts, is the disconnection that, I guess, African American people have with the continent of Africa through colonization and through slavery. And obviously not all African places were enslaved. We just have to clarify that. Black people were not just slaves, and slaves were not just black people. But in America, that is one of the big like connectors to why a lot of black people are in America, or African Americans are in America. Obviously, integration. In later days, people just started to come, and from all over, you know, not just the continent of Africa, but the Caribbean, like Latin America, etc. But I started thinking about that, and does maybe that make also get some people thinking, am I not black enough, or not? Am I not African enough because I'm not from that place? And I think it's interesting because when you come and you learn about slavery and how, you know, people were like stripped of like their identification and their dignity and of being a human being, and how they, I guess people like the colonizers who came there, or who like took, you know, the people from Africa, and how the stripping of your identity, does that whole process and that whole like tragic, treacherous history, does that disconnect you from being African? Like being proud of being black, does that a disconnecting factor? And that's something I've been sort of pondering lately. And I don't know if any of you guys listening out there actually want to give me feedback. I started a email. It's the PassionFruitpodcast at gmail.com. Make sure you remember the at the beginning. PassionFruit Podcast without the. That's already taken. That's somebody else. Don't email that person, but because I won't get it. But if you have an opinion, or if you want to state what you think, feel free to email me. I think it would actually be really cool to have these conversations and then read some emails out loud. And I can keep them anonymous if you want. We'll see if people actually use the email and actually interact that way. But I think that'd be really cool. I was watching, or was listening to the Crossing the Streams podcast by James Turner, who is the Sim Supply, or Flabliki on YouTube. He's also a gamer, and he's also hosted by the podcast Crossing the Streams. It's hosted by him and also his friend Edward C. Lewis. And they were talking about, I just blanked out. But they do a thing in their podcast where they read out emails. They read out every single email that they receive on the show. And I think that's kind of cool. If I don't keep them anonymous, then I'll just say like first names or something. So it's not, you know, I'm not exposing your identity. Or if you don't want me to say your name, I can keep it anonymous. Anyways, but let me know what you think about that. If you have any opinions about, I guess, being, what it means to be black enough, labels, people identifying you by your labels, disconnections from Africa, anything I mentioned in this podcast. If you have any feedback, you can email me, and maybe I can feature some of them in a future podcast episode. I think that'll be kind of fun, is to interact with you guys that way. It's going to be kind of weird since I'm pre-filming a lot of episodes, and I'm not sure, some other episodes I'm not sure when I'm going to actually upload, because I record them out of sequence. So I'm just having some pre-recorded, just backlogged, just in case, you know, I need them, in any event. But yeah, I kind of want to end it here. I was thinking about talking about labels as a child, like in elementary school, but I don't know, it's kind of a gray area, because it's not like people really exactly labeled me in elementary school. If anything, it was the same thing about school, being the quiet girl. But there's labels I put on myself, which are really weird. And I guess I'll maybe talk about that just briefly as we have a little bit of time left. I'm going to take a sip of my water. Excuse me. Okay. But I remember in elementary school, I'm going to make this brief. I used to always, a lot of my friends were like tomboys. Like, they really liked gaming, and they had a lot of just like boy friends, as in like male friends. I mean, we were in elementary school. We were like, what, 6 to like 10? So it's not like, I guess, I don't know. Like, it's not just like, it's not weird, you know? But maybe that's just my experience. But I had a lot of tomboy friends, and I think since I wanted to be like them and I wanted to, you know, be appreciated and accepted by them, I almost sort of like considered myself a tomboy, even though I really wasn't. Like, I was really feminine, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's just taking me so long to sort of just embrace that. Like, honestly, I'm still working on it now. But I tried to identify myself as that as like a kid. Like, even if like things like painting my nails, I thought was like, oh, girls, you know, that's a girly thing to do. Don't do that. And even like, I'm like, that's so like dumb and just juvenile. And I mean, I was a kid. I was like 9 years old. Of course, I'm gonna have, you know, some mentalities that aren't, you know, I guess rational. Or they seem rational then, but now that looking back, they're, you know, they're not that deep. And it shouldn't have mattered. Like, I should have just done stuff that is actually me. Or like, same thing of like liking the color pink. Like, I've always liked the colors pink, purple. I've used to say my favorite color was like green, or I guess more like masculine colors. I don't know why. Like, I really don't know why. And I honestly think it's because of the friends I had. And it's honestly only like 2 people. I had other friends that were like feminine, and I used to like, I guess, not appreciate that, like not want to associate myself with that and think it was weird. And I don't know, I was just a weird kid, and I don't know why I thought these things, and I just hate it. It makes me cringe so hard now, because it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, it really does not matter. Like, and I mention that to say that it's become really hard to sort of like unteach myself the labels that even you put on yourself, or my case, that the labels that I put on myself, that it's not okay to be feminine or whatever. I don't know. And a lot of these things that you tell yourself, you kind of subconsciously just end up believing and just incorporating into your daily life. And it's not good, but it's a thing. So, yeah, I thought I'd just briefly talk about just some of those examples. But yeah, that's all my conversation I wanted to talk about on labels. I actually got through all of my notes, guys, and we're under an hour. Would you look at that? But thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. Once again, you can email me, thepassionfruitpodcast at gmail.com. I will try to put it in the description. It might be in there, it might not. We'll see. And you can check us out there. So I'll try to remember to put that in, because I don't think that's in there right now. So yeah, thank you so much. Let me know what you think. Be sure to leave a rating, and wherever you're watching, so you can help other people find this podcast, share with your friends, etc. Follow us, or follow me, you know. Yeah. I need to think of some sort of outro. But yeah, thanks for listening, watching. Bye, guys.